the idea behind the law is so that you're not prone to building up a huge war chest. Say you get $175,000 in 1 year, and you only spend $25,000.
Was that a local law?
Yeah, yeah, and it's for representatives. The governors have different levels, and federal are, it's wide open federal. So for a local state rep or
Maybe
senator.
it started with his brother giving him, I forget how much, but it sounded like millions.
Right, and there's a per person contribution limit, and there's all kinds of different campaign finance regulations so that they can, you're capped at what you can receive from a single individual at a single event and different things like that. And you have to track it all. It's a pain in the butt, I'll tell you that. Because you have to track the names, address, and
Well, we've got to get started. It's
Yes, sir.
6:30. Good evening. Welcome.
Margaret Stock.
Thanks for still being in this class. It's the weather. Friday night. You guys are here.
Well, it was tempting.
I'll tell you, it must have been. It's either that or I must be really good.
Unfortunately, I have a strong conscience, sense of honor and obligation. It really sucks at times. It's very inconvenient, frankly.
We're kind of going to be talking about that tonight.
You don't say.
As you read the materials. So the quiz questions, I think we talked about those last class pretty well. Unless you want to talk some more about them.
Creator of Cyberpunk games.
Hold them up to find us how they go.
SMITH. Yeah, he's the creator of Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk 2077. Big, hyped game that's coming.
I guess you figured out that if by the time I get home after we're here, that Google automatically puts it on Saturday. I finally posted. So it says Saturday, but it was for Friday. And I hope I didn't confuse everyone with the question of what is it like to be a bat? That's a famous. I guess if you read enough materials on the question in Thomas Nagel, that's like what made his name, a philosopher really, was that question. And of course, he gives you the answer that no, we can't essentially figure it out. But he's already set the theory up so that you can't do it. On the other hand, it's certainly the case, one person emailed me and said they were in Germany and learned a lot, about the Germans, and then actually in the same response they said, but you can't know anything about what it's like to be a bat or anyone else really, and yet here they were saying, yes, I could learn a lot about the Germans. So there's obviously different ways that we talk about, the same words. We know that words mean different things in different contexts. So I understand what it's like to be a bat, because I can imagine. But no, I can't. It depends on what you mean by it.
We were talking about words meaning different things in different contexts. In some languages, like in Chinese, there's 5 different possible tones, and each different tone can even have a different meaning. It's intricate, that detailed, that complicated.
That's one of the reasons I don't study Chinese.
I used to could.
However, so what's it like to be a bat? And I was just kidding when I started throwing vampire musicals up, because obviously I know that vampires don't exist, and well, it depends on what you mean by vampire, right? It's metaphorically, but we don't have folks like French singers and with capes and makeup.
Do you know where it originated?
Concept of the vampire? Well, everyone thinks of Transylvania and Romania and things of that sort, but I don't know.
Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad.
It's from a disease called porphyria.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably very blood consuming.
It's very rare, And if you have like cutaneous porphyria and you go out in the sun, you blister up from the exposure to the sun, so you have to have blood transfusions and, anyhow.
I like how the German word for bat is Fledermaus. Fledermaus,
Flying mouse.
flying mouse. Yeah.
It does kind
It's
of look like a flying mouse. It does.
And if you're a fan of opera, one of the more popular operas is Die Fledermaus, Die Fledermaus,
The flying mouse.
which is not really about a bat, but it's about a party where an individual in the cast is dressed as a bat or something. So that's kind of, I
It's
guess.
a little weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We're weird about bats and stuff. In any case, so and what was the and then we did the question about the scenario in Detroit, which I ended up talking with a friend today. He's a psychology professor. Actually, he's the dean, John Petratus. I don't know if you know him, John. And he uses that same example in his classes too, so that was kind of fun that we both used that Detroit example. Whereas one of my colleagues talked about the trolley example. There's a famous trolley situation where the trolley is coming down the tracks and you're standing on a bridge next to a fat guy. Sorry about that, if any of you, like me, think of yourself as fat. And then the question you ask the class is, the trolley is coming down the tracks and it's heading towards 5 people, and you can stop it and save those 5 people by pushing the fat guy onto the track, because then the trolley will run into him and kill him, but save those 5 people. Would you save those 5 people, or, and push the fat guy? And usually, of course, students refuse to do that. They won't do that. But if the scenario is different and you have the 5 people on one track and a fat guy on the other track, and you can switch the rail, right, so that the trolley goes onto the track that kills the fat guy, more students will say, yeah, I would do that.
Well, doesn't he have at least a chance?
Because it's like you're not physically pushing the guy, but of course the result would still be it's just, but these scenarios are absolutely ridiculous, right? You're familiar with these?
Yeah, no,
I've heard of that before, yeah.
I'm trying to think of any scenario where that would even be. But I'm also thinking of the scenarios where you had, we talked about last semester, it was lab coats telling people to press a button or something.
Oh, electric shock.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So
So you have situations like that.
this doesn't really happen. It's just created in class, so it's not a real one, but it's in, they use it.
I was just going to
ask
suggest
students
that
questions.
we have seen a real-life moral dilemma like that. The one that I think of
But
most
not this
poignantly,
specific one.
no, not this
Yeah.
specific one, but most poignantly was our use of atomic weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The moral dilemma was based,
Do
you
the
know, do we
invasion.
bomb 350,000 people and kill them for sure, or do we let the island war take effect and we end up bombing Tokyo, et cetera, to end the war?
So there's
So I guess they've solved that question then.
Well, I mean, you have to make a decision, right? The trolley's headed down the path, so it's going to run into one group or the other.
Well, and actually, no, I don't have to make a decision. I don't have to get involved. I don't have to bear any responsibility for the outcome
But that's your choice.
since I'm not involved, right? But as soon as I involve myself, then I bear some degree of responsibility for the outcome that I've involved myself in to attain.
Not acting is
It is a
also
choice,
is
yeah.
making decisions.
I think
so.
As in the words of Rush.
It
So
sucks. It's a like which side of a turd sandwich do you start on?
The other, thanks for that. Yeah, yes.
I think they found out the tendency on that, it's not always, but the tendency is like, a person feels less morally responsible if somebody's a casualty of, I don't know.
Indirect versus
Not
direct.
actively using somebody to stop it.
Right, not, I'm not physically
not
pushing the person,
is
but
better than-
I'll push the switch,
Yeah.
I'll more likely push the switch than, oh, well, it wasn't really my fault, because it could have been that he jumped off, or, you know, there could have been other, well,
Well, and that's why I asked about, at
But
least
it's
that way maybe he
curious how-
still has a chance, right?
yeah. So it's curious how we even test these kinds of things.
Well, the context is absolutely everything, all of these, and
The other question was, what's your narrative interpretation of Francois Hardy's song, Le Large, right? I asked that. And a lot of people, I think, got a kick out of looking that song up and listening to it, found it pretty beautiful and passionate and so on. I ended up reading, I think I posted the article in case anyone was interested in it. Although I didn't post it where you would find it, I posted where I would find it.
As if you were a bat. Maybe.
And where is it? Thought it would be right there. Instead, it looks
Just
like
use your
people are really-
echolocation.
I could go here, right? There it is. So I posted an article that she had just recently almost died from lymphoma, but came out of it and was treated, and she's still alive and looks healthy. And well, of course, she made the album after that, so it's kind of interesting.
By coincidence, I actually read that exact very same article, but I still stand by my alternate interpretation as far as who's fulfilling what role.
Ah, that's, yeah. Well, that's not specific. That's the wonderful thing about interpreting, that we can do that. I just happen to like her and listen. I have one of her CDs. That's all. Who buys a CD anymore? Anybody? No. You know, if you want to hear a piece of music, you just go on Google and ask for it. It feels illegal, but it seems like practically anything you could desire is sitting there waiting for you to ask for it.
My wife, myself, and my best friend from childhood still buy actual physical CDs, and between us, we have several hundred of them.
There'll be collector's items pretty soon.
I still
You
have
calling me old?
LPs.
It sounded like he's calling me
And
old.
78s, right? So,
It's only if you're a bat.
8-track tapes, no, I've gotten rid of those, because most of those, they just, disconnected.
Yeah, magnetics go away.
Um,
The vinyl is
my mom
clean
and dad,
now.
by the way.
Vinyls are good.
However, so, and the Tooth Fairy. We can't forget the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus, etc. Is it a lie? I don't know where we go on that. That's obviously another example of where the meaning of the word depends on how you've been raised to use the concept of a lie, whether you think that the Tooth Fairy story or any of those stories are lies, etc. So that's interesting to ask. But, so, tonight we start off with the question, what do we know? And how do we know it? And the text starts off with the Meno. Yes? Anyone had a chance to read the Meno? Very famous dialogue. I would like to go a little bit further back just for fun, and that's because I am very fond of the book by Eric Havelock. The Muse Learns to Write. One of my friends is John Havelock, the son of Eric Havelock. Eric Havelock was a professor in Canada, wrote lots of books on this subject. He's one of the scholars on Plato. And what's interesting about his argument here is that the writing system invented that I think is called Linear B, because it's actually the second Greek system, was invented in order to write the Iliad and the Odyssey. Kind of interesting. And there's some interesting aspects of that in analyzing those texts. The Greeks only talk about very specific examples. So everything is a very specific example. There's no generalities. But by the time you get to Plato, now they are talking about what we might call abstract concepts, like justice in general, as opposed to a particularly just situation. Like, you know, and I'm not sure that we would even think of them as a just situation. If you think of Achilles, you know, in the Iliad, right? Achilles, literally, no honor, right? You know, A and Cles is honor, right? So Achilles is no honor. The reason he has no honor is because somewhere towards the middle, really, of the Iliad, Agamemnon, which I interpret as no balls. So I think of Agamemnon as King No Balls, because he's like, you know, one of the. I know that's not the official, but that's my interpretation of it. No gametes, right? So obviously he has some, because he has some children, and I think that's part of why he's called Agamemnon, is because, of course, his wife is going to kill him, and then the kids are going to kill the wife, and you know, it's just tragic, you know, after a tragic situation. But he's famous for not being able to count how many soldiers he has, you know, and you know, he can't really do what he wants. You know, he's famous for killing his daughter, having her killed because the priests are telling him that you know, the winds won't change unless you sacrifice your daughter, Iphigenia, right? Yes, you're familiar with that? Greeks actually made a Greek movie of it. What movie, right? Yeah, so this is the movie. Whatever this is. It's not even going to give me a. Here it is. So this is the movie. I knew it was on the web. Pretty weird.
So you're already getting into the pirate pub crawl, Tim.
Is that what that is?
No, there's a pirate pub crawl as a fundraiser for Blood Bank tonight. Pirating movie, pirate. Work with me here. It's a little disjointed.
But
So Agamemnon tricks his daughter and tells her she's to marry Achilles. Please come to my camp. So mom goes with her, brings her there. Once she gets there, she discovers that it was a ruse, that Achilles is not going to marry her, but instead she's supposed to be slaughtered in order to appease the gods. And initially, of course, she's horrified and so on, but she actually gets to the point where she decides that it is her appointed role, and she deliberately goes and volunteers in order to sacrifice herself for her people. So it's, in a sense, like a Jesus figure, except a female, in the Greek tradition. She actually will go up and do it voluntarily.
That's horrible. That's so horrible.
Even the crown of thorns.
They're supposed to be flowers, of course.
She's sacrificing herself so that the wind can blow, so that they can go to war, so that they can go slaughter other people.
That's the story.
That's
For blessings and such. So.
no amen.
That's Achilles, by the way. And once he found out how he had been used as bait for her, he was upset and he was going to fight against everyone else, but he was the only one. And by then she had changed, she decided that this was her fate to do this, so the altar's up the top there, of course. That's her father Agamemnon. And the thing is, he doesn't want to sacrifice her, but even though he's king, since all of the men want him to do it, he yields and will kill his own daughter. The way, if you compare this to Abraham and Isaac, right? Remember, Abraham is asked to sacrifice his son Isaac, and takes his son up the hill to slaughter him with the hand of Gabriel. No, I forget, whatever angel stops him, right?
People have spoken, so to speak.
So, by the way, Kierkegaard does a great contrast between those two different opposite kinds of situations. Now notice the wind is starting to pick up. I don't know how they did that, but
It's Greece.
Yeah.
Always
Agamemnon.
windy.
They had a huge
Agamemnon-
crew there that.
Agamemnon figures out, hey, wait a minute, the wind is already changing, so he charges up to try to save her. You feel the wind? Well, you wouldn't feel it. But I can feel it for some reason. Notice this movie is, what, 2 hours and 4 minutes, or 9 minutes, so if you feel like it, you could always just look it up. And I'm pretty sure you could find it with English subtitles.
You've already ruined the ending.
Sorry. I should have said trigger warning, right?
Tradition.
Spoiler alert.
Tradition, tragedy. Everybody dies.
Off to the Corablia. I don't speak Greek. To the ships. close enough, by the way, all those guys are naked. Sorry about that. In some scenes,
It's pretty warm in there.
and of course, you know, Clytemnestra is the daughter was killed for that. So as you recall, when he gets back, she kills him. So Achilles is the big brute that, did we talk about this last class?
No.
So he's the big brute that basically can beat the Trojans. Agamemnon is not, right? Not much of a warrior compared to Achilles at all. And in one of the battles around Troy, where they're very successful and capture the priestesses from the one temple, Achilles gets Briseis of the fair cheeks, by the way. And by the way, they never explain which cheeks they mean, right? Are the fair cheeks. In any case, Agamemnon gets a prize too, but the priest comes out from the temple, and that's his daughter, and he says, the gods are upset with you for taking my daughter, because he's the conduit for the gods. He basically feels upset, and at the time, that's, you know, what the priest felt intuitively was obviously what the gods were upset about, and so he comes after Agamemnon and says, you know, the gods are upset with you for taking her, and Agamemnon gives her back. Oh, you know, can't upset the gods. Right? But then he's upset himself because he no longer has a prize. And he's the king. He ought to have a prize. So Menelaus says to him, well, you can have any prize you like, so go and pick and take one. And so what does the fool do, right? You know, he goes to the big hero of the Greek side, and he takes Achilles' prize, Briseis. Which, of course, means that Achilles is now pissed off, and he's been dishonored. That's why he has no honor, right? That's why his name is Achilles, right? Although it's always been Achilles, but now you can see why it's Achilles, right? So he goes back and he cries in his tent because he's been dishonored by the king. And he won't go fight, right? So, of course, the Greeks start to lose, and everyone comes to Agamemnon and says, we've got to get Achilles back in the fight. So they beg, and of course, even Patroclus goes and begs, their cousins, he begs Achilles to get back in the fight, and Achilles says no, and Patroclus asks, well, can I have your armor then? And I'll, you know, at least fool them. And so, oh, okay. And of course, Patroclus goes in Achilles' armor. And you picture, this is, you know, a guy clunking around in a suit that's about 2 times too big for him. And it's not long before they realize, whoa, that's not Achilles. And they kill him and take the armor. And that's what finally gets Achilles back into the fight. But by the way, they have also given Achilles Briseis back, which, by the way, means that when Achilles ends up being killed, remember, he got, unfortunately, it turns out he had an Achilles heel. Who'd have thunk it? And that's where he got shot. Greek joke, I suppose, right? Nobody likes that joke. I don't know why. But in any case, amazingly, Briseis gives us the grief poem lament. It's lament. That's not exactly what I was looking for, but her grief poem is famous as the way a woman should cry over her lost love. Now, a contemporary feminist pointed out Achilles killed her husband and 3 brothers and stole her and then raped her on multiple occasions. And then she got traded to Agamemnon. She probably had no clue why that happened, right? And then came back to Achilles, right? And then, of course, Achilles, not too much later, ends up being slaughtered too. And who does she cry for? Achilles. Does that sound right? Anybody? Yeah, that's okay. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Is that just? I don't know. Would you say that's an example of justice? It's another interesting puzzle. Yes.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound even remotely just, but if we were to take it as, say, ancient world propaganda, it almost sounds like something like a propaganda department got their hands on it or
Well,
something.
this is the perfect example of the Greek ethical system at the time. That's
The musical.
Another day, walking in circles, haunted by memories. I push on this wheel. I pray to Kram, grant me revenge, and help me to answer the riddle of steel. A shy little boy, I couldn't protect them, helpless and timid, as weak as a girl. They butchered my people, the dogs ate my father, my mother beheaded.
That's her head.
They took my whole world. Kram, where is the wizard who killed my mother? Still, I can recall his terrible gaze. Kram, where are the two
Darth
snakes
Vader.
facing each other? Kram, if you're my god, then show me the way. I'm on the path, chopping up bodies, hacking and slicing, and look at me now. With loyal friends joining my party, each step I take I'm fulfilling my vow. Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of the women. Hear the lamentation of the women. Crush your enemies.
I gotta say, this is one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time.
For you, and hear the lamentation of the women. Hear the lamentation of the women. Come, show me the wizard who killed
This
my
is
mother.
awesome.
True, I've never prayed to you before. Still, what would I give if you could help me see this through? And if you do not listen, then the hell with you. Kram, where are the two snakes racing each other? Kram, if you're my god, then show me the way.
this is my favorite scene.
I swear this wizard will fall, cause this has begun, they murdered them all. I'm the last one, I issued the call, revenge for my mom, I pray to you. Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of the women.
What about making fewer enemies? Just saying, it's an idea.
And I would like to state for the record that they are not the only people who've done this.
Oh.
robot
I might
chicken.
even argue that there are some societies
No.
in this world that still
He
use
means the
that as
musical
their
thing.
main
No,
ethical.
I'm talking as Conan the Barbarian as a musical.
Oh, well, yeah, that's.
But
In
that too.
Are the other ones this good?
fact, they've
'Cause that
done
was
other
awesome.
ones,
There's a
and that wasn't
the
Arnold.
robot chicken
So-
take on it.
That wasn't Arnold. Just so you. And how many of you had actually seen the original movie that this was a pun on? Not very many. Sorry about that. I ruined it for you now.
I suspect they covered all that.
That's like the second movie you've ruined for us in like 15 minutes.
Or, on the other hand, now I've saved you the money. You don't have to go see it. Of course, it's probably free.
Apparently it doesn't cost anything because it's right there on YouTube.
There it is. Yeah.
It cost me the journey of discovery.
But now you have a better perspective.
Apologia. Sorry. Okay.
Trust
Well,
your
but
enemies,
really,
you
this
know.
is like in capsule form the ethics that was just the way the world was and still is in some places.
Would you say that that would be a reflection of the view, of an economic view of zero-sum game?
Well, it's the big brute who gets his way. Not for long, because they don't live very long, famously, right? Achilles is an example. Knows that if he does and kills Hector, that his death is in the stars. His mom knows that. That's why she tried to protect him, but stupidly held on to his foot, while she was giving him the protection, which is why, of course, his ankle was where he could still be killed by an arrow.
Well, that's why I think...
Done by Paris, who is, of course, eventually going to, well, not really, but Paris, France, same name. How did it get there? It's not my fault. Okay, so when we think of Achilles, that's the kind of justice they're thinking about. But it's not an abstract form of justice. I wanted to say there are a couple other interesting examples of language change that, and that is that the Greeks apparently only had a few colors. In the Iliad, I'm not sure, I think both the Iliad and the Odyssey, as far as I know, there is red, the color red, there's the color black, and there's the color white. Which, one of the most famous lines is the wine red sea, right? Which, if you've ever seen an ocean, no, it's not usually the color of wine. Interesting argument is that they weren't talking about the color per se, but instead of how it kind of looked liquidy and glittery, so that wine in a glass looks not red, but that the color that was translated as red was actually, it looked liquidy, but white and black. Of course, they had red for blood and that sort of thing. But literally, Europeans began arguing over whether or not that meant that the Greeks could not see colors the way we could. Of course, the view today is that, well, of course they could, because biological change doesn't take place that quickly. They probably could see very much the same way. The thing is, culturally, if they didn't have a name for those colors, they might not have been able to discriminate them the way we do. By the way, that's not just the Greeks in the ancient times that had that difference. When we look at different cultures, different languages, people have different names for different colors than we do, and it seems that they see colors differently because of the language that enables them to do that. So when we talk about the effect that language has on the way you think, that's one of the examples of how important language is for the way you are able to see the world.
Well, I was going to say there's also, I'd say, a good chance of something like a document that old that there's probably some context missing of some kind. So a color for red or black or white may actually take on a different meaning entirely, so it's maybe, you know, so red, you know, wine red may actually not be.
The sky was viewed as black, even in daylight.
Actually, that makes sense. If you,
Because if you think, whoa, but you know, it's blue, it's
but I'm starting to think of how you got a black dye in those days is probably through a lot of blue coloration. So that might be something.
I have no basis for this. This is just a wild guess.
that's all any
It
of this
may
is.
possibly be that they purposely limited the colors that they used in the story because of some symbolic link. Like, for example, when I say the color
As
red,
good a guess
I'm not
as-
really talking about literally the color red or a specific shade of red, but I'm talking about, you know, a feeling or an imagery that that color is associated with or evocative of or symbolic of. So it could be that they specifically chose those limited range of colors, not because they didn't know that other colors existed, but because they were trying to keep a symbolic theme going.
Well, if you're curious about this, this is a book I recommend.
Did
Guy
that make sense,
Deutscher.
or did I just sound crazy?
No, that's about right.
But have a look at this too. This is where I got that interesting bit about the three colors and that kind of issue, and how the Europeans were starting to, because this was after evolution was a new theory with, you know, thanks to Darwin, and you had folks who were Greek scholars looking through this and beginning to notice, hey, wait a minute, where are all their colors? They only have three. How could that be? It's you know, it must be that we've evolved more abilities with our eyes. No, that's not. That's probably not the case. That's kind of interesting. But so, back to like the concept of justice. So we don't see general concepts in the earlier situations, but by the time we get to Plato, we do. So Plato seems to be the first time where now they're thinking, well, we've got, you know, someone saying this was just, and this was just, and this was just, and this was just. But you know, none of those are all the same. What do we mean by justice? And of course, they can't quite figure out what it is because they've only got all these specific examples. So when we look at the dialogues, what we see are Socrates literally drawing out all these different examples. You know, what is justice? The interest of the stronger. Says Thrasymachus. Achilles gets his way, and that's justice, right? And then someone else will come up. Well, but sometimes that doesn't really work out well, etc. We kind of demonstrate that doesn't work. We then go to another definition. Tell the truth and pay your debts. TTPD, by the way. If you want to memorize them. TTPD, tell the truth and pay your debts. I still remember Professor Claghorn, TTPD. He taught us chants, so that we could remember.
Philosophy chants?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a whole page of them.
For the first time now, in this moment, this class just got weird.
It's actually really good neuroscience to do that. It's the ways mnemonic tools. Yep.
Yeah.
So TTPD, tell the truth, pay your debts. That's justice. It actually doesn't work very well. We get into situations. For example, the white lie. Oh, remember, I think I mentioned to a couple of you when you complained about lying as the tooth fairy thing. There's the example of the friend who gives you his shield and sword while he goes to a drinking party. Well, I usually change it to keys. He gives you his truck keys. So if I come out of Coots and I'm drunk, don't give me my keys back. And so of course he gets snockered. Comes to you, I got my keys, and you're like, your wife came and got the truck and left. I gave her the keys. yeah, that's wrong. The truck's sitting right there, the keys are in your pocket, but you're lying to your friend for the friend's best interest, right? And everyone kind of all agrees, at least with Socrates, that no, you don't give the sword and shield back when the guy's drunk, because that's going to be bad for everybody, including your friend. So for the friend's best interest, we tell a lie. That's a white lie, or whatever you want to call it. So tell the truth isn't good all the time. It's not just all the time, et cetera. And, you know, paying your debt would be giving him the sword and shield back, right? Well, let's try another definition. Give to each his own. Geho, right? G-E-H-O. Give to each his own. And that ends up becoming what they accept as just. But you can't achieve that just as an individual. So justice turns out not to be a virtue of an individual, but instead a virtue of a state. And you need to construct a state, a republic, that's essentially going to enable everyone to get what's right for them. And that would be the ideal state based on justice. Right? So that's the dialogue, the Republic, eventually,
Republic,
right?
right?
Plato's Republic.
In which he condemned democracy.
Well, democracy sucks as far as the Greeks are concerned.
It does. In a pure, true
It
democracy.
leads
it's
to
wonderful.
anarchy because in a democracy, people vote benefits for themselves,
Correct.
but don't want to pay for them. And so they vote against taxes.
I think the
And so the
quote.
government goes bankrupt and it falls into anarchy. So
Let's
that's
see if I can get
the
the quote
traditional
correct.
view of, that's why they were fans of aristocracy, where you have the rule of the best, who turn out to be philosopher kings, which
Let me know if I get
makes
the
it
quote
really rough
correct
on
or not.
philosophy teachers to kind of promote that sort of.
Democracy lasts only until the public realizes it can vote itself money from the treasury. I'm butchering that too much?
That's pretty much the same thing. Aristotle says the same thing. But his teachers, Plato and so on. Well, so the Meno. Now we get to the Meno, and the topic in the Meno is, can virtue be taught? And Meno, the name Meno, I interpret as unchanging. For example, Parmenides, who's another individual in some of the dialogues, and was a real philosopher. Parmenides literally means two unchanging ideas that, by the way, are in conflict, like the one and the many. For example, the universe is one thing, but it's got many parts. No, you can't have one thing if it's got parts. But we've obviously got all these parts. So, you know, how do you reconcile that paradoxa, right? Two doxa, things you have to believe. It's one thing, but it's many things, right? So when we look at Meno, I think of Meno as it's unchanging. And the end result of this is, no, you cannot teach somebody to be virtuous. You're born the way you're going to be. Your character is an intrinsic part of you from, the beginning. Sorry, that's not a very good, I should practice that. And there it is, Sorry, I was never actually at a birth. So I get all of my concept of how that works from Bill Cosby, who I'm not allowed to joke with anymore because he's suddenly became evil. Shoot, 90% of my brain is Bill Cosby humor. So I don't know how to.
It's funny you
get
say that
around.
because the modern psychology is finding that the personality is pretty much there at birth. In other words, the way a baby's
You have the DNA,
working.
but while the fetus is developing, mom is flipping the switches.
Well, that's the classic
And
nature versus
come out,
nurture
and that's
argument.
part, yeah, well, that keeps changing.
But
as we
here's
go.
the thing, it's really, I think, in my opinion, very simple. Nurture is your default settings, but default settings can be overwritten.
Wait, did you say nurture?
Yeah, nature.
Nature is your default settings, but default settings can be overwritten.
Well, I
So
mean,
the final
now we get into
arbiter would be-
epigenomics, and it seems like even during your life, your genes can be switched by the environment. You're following that, yeah.
It
so,
is, they have discovered it is literally possible for your DNA to change.
and then
over
that
time.
can be passed on to the next generation, so it's not the official Darwinian, it's Lamarckian evolution. Are you familiar with that controversy too? Yes? It's
No,
kinda-
no, I'm not.
Lamarck,
What was it the guy who believed in, what was it, sort of forced evolution?
What's that?
So there's Lamarck. Basically thought that changes in the adult could be passed on in that next generation. Darwin's theory basically said, no, it has to be selection that does that.
But
Right.
Lamarck's theory would make sense if it is true that I can change my DNA over time as an adult, and then I have children and that changed DNA is passed on to them, that's now their new baseline or default setting, right?
Well, and I think the thing to say here is that, like so many things in real life, most even evolution is not so straight cut in the sense of it's one thing or the other. You're going to see a little bit of both.
And then there's always the mutation dice roll.
That too, and
Maybe the genes didn't splice correctly.
exactly. But this also goes back to psychology, though. One of the things that we covered in my psychology class last semester was it's nature and nurture.
Right.
So
Right.
you gotta also-
If you really want to do overkill to the evolutionary thing, this, I think, is around 800 some pages and just goes through the evolution of evolution and evolutionary theory, the structure of evolutionary theory, and all the different variants, and it goes all the way up to, unfortunately, Stephen Jay Gould, who's absolutely hilarious and interesting, died. I think he was only 68. But fantastic book, and you finish reading it, and you realize, well, there's no real argument between evolution and non-evolution. There's an argument over what variation of evolutionary theory is actually supported by the newest data and everything. And we see it goes through multiple variations, et cetera. And it was just years ago while I was teaching here. If you mentioned Lamarckian evolution, people thought, "Oh, you're a wacko," and now it's like back in absolute spades because of all the new information about epigenomic influences. So when we think of Plato, we go back and look at Plato, and Plato says you're born that way. You're born virtuous or evil, basically. So the problem then is, if you're going to be trying to